Mobile users have a really high expectation when it comes to mobile apps. They expect high quality from a hardware perspective, and this is the same thing that they expect from the software running on it. And also it's easy for mobile users to just with a single tap or just a few taps to go to the competitor and get another app that is working much, much better than yours. It's surprising that still a lot of companies still don't invest enough time and money on their mobile apps.
Hi, I'm Eden Fulgo, and you're listening to How It's Tested, a monthly series where we discuss great products, how they're tested, and other stories from the testing community, featuring interviews with tech leaders, founders, testing experts, and creators. How It's Tested is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, or if you would like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at TeamMobot. That's TeamMobot. Today, we'll be chatting with Daniel Knott, a testing veteran and author with over 10 years of QA experience. Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us on the How It's Tested podcast.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's always really exciting to have an opportunity to talk to a testing expert like you. I know that you've been working in mobile software testing for a number of years now. You've written a couple of books.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you on the conference circuit speaking about testing. I've seen your white papers online and just the impressive work that you've done. But just to give our audience here an understanding of kind of your background and where you're from, would be great to just hear a little bit about how you got into software testing for your career and just some of the experiences that you've had so far.
No problem. Yes, I'm working in the software testing industry, I think, since 2008. And like many others, I fell into software testing because software testing is not really something that you can learn at a university. Sometimes you have maybe one class that you can take on quality engineering or software engineering with a focus to quality. But I started my testing career at IBM back then in Germany. And also I'm based in Germany, northern Germany near Hamburg. And I got a chance to work as a working student at IBM while doing my computer science university degree. And basically back then they had no idea what to do with me. So I started the very first day. I had little experience in programming. And even though I got accepted as a working student, and so they said hey, we have an application here. It was some storage system, heavy fat client on a desktop system. And they say, yeah, how about you test this? I was like, okay, I have no idea. Let's see what I can do. And I liked it, actually. I liked to explore new things and to find potential bugs in an application. And even back then, I was already doing exploratory testing, and I wasn't even aware of that. So I was just exploring the application and was documenting my findings and talking to developers. And this is something what I really enjoyed, basically. And then I went back to university, of course, and I was in a lucky position. I had a professor who was into quality and testing, and he recommended me some books back then, and to help me in getting more insights into software testing, because I told him hey, this is really something I would like to do. And I finally wrote my bachelor thesis on that topic. I think it was web-based application, and was testing and comparing different tools back then to how to test in web-based application. And since I was so hooked, I started my career in software testing. Okay, this is something I would like to do. And I was lucky to get a first job in a company where they hired me as a junior software tester. And I finally met like-minded people, and it was great. So I had the chance to exchange with people. I was able finally to learn from professional people how to do software testing right. And they taught me the techniques and everything that is required in order to become a software testing professional. So this was basically my start into that role. And then a couple of years later, I got asked to start in a first mobile team. And I think it was 2011, early 2011, something. They asked me hey, you would like to go into mobile testing? I said, I have no idea about it. Let's go ahead. And it was basically back then, it's now 12 years ago, more than 12 years. Yeah. it was a green field. There was nothing from a tool perspective. Yeah, there was literally, I mean, the app stores were just around the corner. Companies tried to bring an app out there on iOS and Android. Also, back then it was BlackBerry and Windows Phone where I had to test against. And I was completely, again, a newbie rookie on that field. And it felt good at the same time, but it also was scary because I had to try out lots of tools. I mean, the whole tool landscape wasn't really mature. So it was trial and error, basically. And the good thing is I got this opportunity as well in the company. And they were okay with us exploring, like really doing research on the topic. And back then I had the idea like, hey, why not writing everything down in a blog? Because I put so many work into that very first, let's say, pioneer work. I don't call it pioneer work, but for me, it was like something doing like from scratch. And I shared this. I thought, okay, let's do the blog and let's see if somebody's interested in this kind of topics. And I never expected people to read it. And it kind of blew up actually because people were really interested in mobile testing back then. And I also got the very first speaking chance to talk at a conference about a topic. We also like, I fell into that speaking slot or speaking career, so to say, because we were supporting the Agile Testing Days. Maybe some of you know them. It's like a big testing conference in Germany and also well known in Europe and I think in the whole testing world. And my company back then, we were a sponsor basically. So, and as a sponsor, we were, I don't know what kind of mode we had, was premier sponsorship because we got a speaking slot. And usually like companies who got like speaking slots, they use it for sales pitches, showcase what their products have to offer. And my boss back then said, no, we don't want to do that. Let's show the audience like that we do cool things from a technology point of view rather than focusing on our product. And they asked me like, hey, Daniel, you would like to talk about your stuff on mobile testing? I was like, okay, I don't know. I've never done a talk in front of people. Let's do so. And they said, yeah, come on. It's the vendor track. Not nobody, but only a few people will come around. So, and it was a side track. It was a smaller room. But since my talk, I think it was something around challenges in mobile testing, if I'm not mistaken. The room was packed. I was the only one on the agenda on the program talking about mobile, and they had to bring in more chairs. The people were sitting on the ground, on the floor. They were standing outside. So it was ridiculous. And I was so nervous because I didn't expect that. And then after the conference, all of the people approached me like they would like to know more about it and asked me things about it. And even that back then, I felt like a total newbie on mobile testing because it was new to me still. But and since then, my speaking career also took off. I was invited to other conferences in Europe and meetups. I followed up my blogging career, if it's a career. And then I had one day I had the idea like, hey, let's write a book about it. Yeah. Let's put everything that I've experienced in a book, because I think books are something really great and powerful and something that people like to read and follow up on. And I told nobody back then. I think it was in 2014. I just started it on my own. I just told my wife like, hey, look, I might write a book. She was, yeah, he's crazy. Just another crazy idea that he has. And let's do him. Maybe next week he's doing something different. But I was hooked. And I wrote the book for more than a year in my spare time. And then I was lucky to get a publisher contract. It was due to the people from the software testing community saying thank you to Lisa Crispin. Some of you might know her, and Markus Gärtner, also like a fellow software tester back then. They basically recommended me to publisher, and they said, yes, let's do it. And then I was an author at some point. And again, it was like one little tiny stone to lead to the next opportunity. And that was just great. And and now, jumping a bit forward into now, I'm working as the head of software tester, or head of product quality engineering, how we call ourselves at myOneWolf in Germany. We are working as an IT service provider or consultancy. So we help different clients within Germany to develop great products and to test them, help them ship their products in terms in front of the users. Some of the clients are more B2B focused. Some of them are B2C focused. So it's a complete set of things that you can think of. Yeah, so this is a longer introduction of myself, but I hope now you get a better picture. For those of you who know, my blog is Adventures in QA. You can follow up on it. You find all of this stuff there. In case you have questions, always ping me via social media. I'm always happy to help out, to share yeah, to share knowledge. This is something that I really enjoy. Just later today, I just got asked to, I mean, whenever the podcast is available, but today is Test Bash Spring, and I got asked like, hey, can you jump into another call? It's like, okay, let's do so. So this is also the cool thing, that if you have kind of a name in the industry, that you get asked to attend events, and that's something what I really enjoy, is to exchange and to share the knowledge with others. Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was first doing research so I started my company Mobot 5 years ago, and I remember at the very beginning of my founder journey, I was looking for any resources I could find about mobile app testing, and your book was like the only book that was available at the time. And this was in like 2018, which was very surprising to me and I think that kind of goes back to like, why was that conference room so packed, at the conference? People are so starved for mobile specific, mobile first software testing best practices. And it is slightly different than the more sort of generic world of software testing or testing a web app or testing a desktop app. And so it's really cool to kind of see that you found your specialization or your niche where there's such a big community of testers, of software professionals, IT professionals that really need more guidance, more resources, and they're hungry for kind of these best practices around mobile. And so I'm curious, when you first started your career and, you were testing both web and mobile, and then you kind of made the decision to specialize in mobile software best practices, what were some of the kind of key differences or kind of key points of specialization that you feel like makes mobile testing different than just sort of like generic best practices you can read about on the internet about software testing?
I got hooked basically because of this is also like one of the biggest challenges, is the difference in the hardware. I like this extra point, the extra challenge when it comes to software testing. I mean, when we do like normal software testing for web applications or desktop applications, it's more stationary. Like users tend to sit in front of a big screen and do whatever they would like to do with the product. But with mobile, you can go out, you can do whenever you are, you can use the products. And this was something that hooked me. Yeah, I really liked the idea. I mean, back then it was also really cool, to play around with all the different devices, always have the latest ones available, all the gadgets that are out there. So this was something from a technology point of view, which was really interesting to me back then. And also, yeah, to solve these challenges, like, how to do automation on a mobile device, keeping all the scenarios in mind, like being outside, not being connected to the office Wi-Fi, but really go out in the areas, in the countryside or in the city, depending on the user base, where are they using your product. And the product I was testing back then was a social media app, and users, we saw it on our tracking data. Basically, they were using it in the morning when they were commuting, and then during lunch break, and then again on the commuting time. So this was also important knowledge for me to focus on that timing. So I also took time to test on a train, for example, to be out there with multiple devices and a pen of paper to note down things and doing lots of screenshots and stuff. And then also was doing something in the office where people were also using the product. So there was kind of this mix of, getting out of the office and tackling the different challenges for the different devices.
That's really interesting, because then I think the introduction of, like you were saying, testing on the train, testing in different Wi-Fi conditions, it almost kind of feels like there needs to be more test case coverage than you would traditionally need to do for a web app. Mm-hmm. And that sort of like ratio of automated to manual testing or simulated to physical testing is different between web and mobile. What do you think, in your experience, based on all the clients that you've worked with, what's kind of the right balance of automated versus manual testing for mobile?
It really depends on the product that you are going to test. Of course, you should always try to do lots of automation. Yeah, automation on real devices is always the highest aim that you should go for. Like, get as many devices in the company, or use like cloud devices or stuff like that, to test on the end consumer devices, because that's where the magic is happening, right? Nobody's using an simulator out there to use your product. So this is not so different compared to traditional software testing for web applications. So you should like keep this always up. Like, whenever you develop a new feature, the team should ask themselves, like, hey, on which level we would like to automate, unit level API and so forth and so forth. Like, what's the user journey? Is this something that we should automate from an end-to-end perspective? And this should always be at heart. And then, of course, what I usually do is tell the people, like, do lots of manual testing, as you just mentioned. Yeah, manual testing is really important because there's so many factors that you cannot simulate or like code in scripts that are really hard to tackle. I think it's also the combination of things, right? I mean, back then when I started, crowd testing wasn't a thing, yeah, or like cloud providers wasn't a thing. We were building up our own cloud devices, which was tedious and exhausting. And but now it's much better, right? I mean, we have so many great services that companies can pick and choose from to integrate this into their testing activities on real devices. Maybe in the combination with crowdsourcing, crowd testing, this could be something to get more people from, like, in the wild. You use the product from the end consumer perspective. So that's the mix of things, I would say.
I know you had mentioned, when you first started your career in mobile testing, you had to deal with Windows Mobile, you had to deal with BlackBerry. Those were, I remember back in college at the time, like, it was the coolest thing. It was the ultimate status symbol to have a BlackBerry. And it's kind of funny how our ecosystem has evolved since then.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the best practices or sort of how you tested Windows mobile devices and BlackBerries, is that kind of the same testing approach, the same strategy that you use for testing iOS and Android today? Or was it different back then? Like, how do you feel like the industry has evolved?
I would say that from a mobile perspective and from a mobile scenario perspective, it was the same. Yeah, people using the product on a small device. Of course, what was different between the platforms was the form factor of the device. I mean, BlackBerry had the physical keyboard, even though they were experimenting also with complete touch devices. But their main USP was always have this physical keyboard. So this was completely different in terms of UI design, development, and also testing. Yeah, so this was different. And Windows was using this tile approach. It was also a different approach, also from a different approach when it comes to the app architecture, like how to use the product, how to use system integrations. Yeah, so you could use different system components within an app, for example. That was different. But overall, from a mobile perspective, it was more or less the same. Yeah, that was not the biggest deal. Yeah, it was sometimes the hardest part was to configure the devices, to put them in the right state. I mean, back then also Test Flight and all these apps, like this wasn't a thing. So I had a computer for Windows to deploy the app on Windows, a second one for BlackBerry because we were using it in an isolated way, as isolated as possible. I had a Mac Mini. I had some Macs on my system, on my desk. So it was basically working in a end consumer electronic market. So many devices, different systems that I had to use to juggle around with to deploy the apps to the different devices. That was actually also the hardest part. So the whole device management is a huge topic. It got much easier now with only iOS and Android, even though it's still challenging. Because now we have, for example, we have watches, gadgets that we can connect with, and this is now another level that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I know at your role at Bayborn Wolf, you guys are a consultancy and you work with a number of different clients, each of them with their own demographics of, I'm sure there's a different mix of this company uses more iOS and less Android, or this company is Android only.
Yeah.
So in that kind of fragmentation, how do you guys give recommendations to your clients about how many iOS devices should you test? How many versions back of Android should you test? Like, how do you normally kind of propose a strategy for clients?
Yeah, first of all, we like to get information about the user base, like who is the user, the consumer of the product. Is there anything specific to it? It's like a specific demographic, the specific usage patterns, like you just mentioned. Is it more Android? Is it more iOS? And based on that data, we do like recommendations. Yeah. And I mean, I think at the moment, there is no client that's just saying, okay, iOS only or Android only. They usually cover both. I mean, we have one client that's more on the luxury end of things. This client is more focusing on iOS. because that's what's in their user base. They're now thinking of maybe we should also do Android, but this is in their minds, that maybe we can get some more people from there as well. But so this really depends on the client, on the brand itself, and then of course on the customer base. And then it's depending on the client and industry. We offer a mix of the things I just mentioned, and do lots of automation, do lots on also use a lot of the emulators and simulators in other services, because you don't need to deploy on a real device to lower the burden of things and to speed up things. But we never say don't go without real device testing. Being it cloud, cloud should be like, to test on a real device is always a must. Some of the clients say, okay, we don't want to use crowd testing because we don't have the capacity to manage the crowd as well. Because imagine testing your product on maybe, let's say, 1,000 crowd testing people. You also get feedback, and you have to handle this feedback. So that's why we always say, okay, let's find the 10 most used devices among your customers. Get those devices either internally. Some of the clients are like, okay, we need to do everything in-house. We are not allowed to use cloud testing providers, for example. So we have to get all the devices, maintain them for them. And if they're more like open, we can also use cloud devices, cloud services, and then we use that. But finally, we also have to test in the wild outside, because some clients that we're working with are, for example, car manufacturers. And if you're developing an app that is connected to your car, you have to go out. If your office is big enough to bring the car in, this might be an option too, but usually you have to go outside to go to test in the car while somebody maybe is driving. So you're the passenger, or while you're standing in front of the car or next to the car. And this poses another level of challenge, because you not only have to configure your device, but you might only also configure the car. So is the car in the right state? So in case the team is developing the complete stack from mobile device, from mobile app to the backend service and APIs to that car, for example, that's a whole chain of end-to-end testing perspective that you have to keep in mind. So, and this usually is also like then not a job for only one person, for one testing person, because this is just too many stacks, too many layers, the complexity is just too high. So we have to work together in a team to solve that and to handle the challenge.
Yeah, what you were describing about the CarPlay or Android Auto application that you guys support testing, it's actually quite similar to an experience that we've had at Mobot, where this customer, they have an iOS app, they have an Android app, it connects to CarPlay, connects to Android Auto, and Mobot uses our robots to run sort of a basic suite of tests connecting to just like a head unit that's not in a car. But after our testing process finishes, the customer has a separate QA team that is literally going out and driving real cars to make sure that everything is working end to end. The firmware on that car, the head unit is the right version. Everything needs to work end to end. And so, I can totally see how it creates this whole other dimension of testing that even if you have sort of like best practices with software testing on the automated side, there's still this physical real world component that's really interesting. But it also means that product is more unique. It's even more compelling because it's integrating better with people's lives. So that's really cool to kind of see that your team is able to kind of balance both, the real world constraints, but also kind of like the traditional software best practices. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you guys have seen so many different clients, so many different apps. Do you feel like every client you're able to kind of take the same recommendations from client to client to help them build the testing infrastructure? Or is there any examples of a client that have kind of surprised you where it really needed you to kind of rethink the way that you think about best practices, or even maybe goes against something that you recommend in your book?
What sometimes surprises us is that we have like challenges of the tech stacks that the clients are using. So we have to adapt to those. It's not only like a green field where you say, okay, let's use the standard tools for mobile, like to get kickstarted. Sometimes they have legacy systems that need to get connected to it. So that's a challenge, definitely. So there's something that we need to find solutions together with the client to find tailored solutions. And in case we see that this doesn't make any sense, we try to recommend the client, like, hey, this might not be a good idea because of X, Y, Z. It adds a lot of complexity to it. It's not like maintainable anymore, and it doesn't make any sense. This is, of course, what can happen. And I mean, there's one client now that's quite challenging. Is also again the end-to-end perspective. It's not only the mobile app that we are going to develop and test, but it's also the whole like API interfaces, not only to the backend system, like which is a cloud system. It's also connected to an IoT device. Yeah, so we have another layer on top of it. So IoT microservices running on, or like code running on limited hardware resources. Yeah, so it's not something like, hey, we go to the cloud, let's deploy, let's get some more capacity, just spawn a new server, get more capacity. No, we are really limited in things. And yeah, there was lately an issue that we found out that from a programming perspective, we were using like the wrong variables, like the wrong data types. So we were just consuming too much battery, not too much battery, but too much storage. So we had to rework the whole code base and the whole testing infrastructure again to fit on the hardware devices. So that's really challenging. Yeah. So then of course the recommendations that I usually do in the book and also in talks is, yes, it's a starting point where we can start off, but there's always like, it depends, we need to go this way. And sometimes still there's even some experimentation. Yeah. I mean, one client we had that was really good in building hardware devices, but back then they were like stupid dumb devices. They were not connected to a cloud, so they were not connected to a mobile device. They had no Bluetooth interface, no Wi-Fi. And so this was again greenfield for the client. So again, we had the chance to do some research together with the client, which is great, yeah, because then we can experiment again. We also, as a company, can learn again from that client, like how to do things which can lead in the long run again to new recommendations. Yeah. So this is something that we explore.
Got it. I know when you were first writing your book, since you were one of the very few experts in the space at the time, that was kind of where these device farms, these virtualized device farms, where they are real physical devices plugged into racks, so by USB. And I think that was still kind of gaining adoption, gaining traction, when you were first kind of one of the few experts.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, that started really gaining steam. There's also, XCUI, Espresso, these testing frameworks are getting better all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's Detox, there's Maestro, there's all these new frameworks that are popping up for cross-platform, cross-functional apps as well. I'm curious what your opinions are of some of these newer tools that have popped up. There are even some of these no-code UI automation recording tools that have appeared. I'm sure you've tried many of them, but what is kind of your perspective on these tools? Where do you think this industry is kind of heading?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment, right? I mean, the news kit on the block is Maestro. You just mentioned it. I mean, it's kind of I mean, I was hooked as well. I mean, I still like it, what the team is doing there. So when I was started the first place, I was like, nah, this cannot be true. It cannot be that fast, that easy to to set it up and to get it running. But it's actually true, and that's something what I really think is a great thing, because using Appium and installing Appium can be like a tedious job and is complex and takes a lot of time. And also, what we see at our clients, for example, is that some companies of course, they don't want to spend too much money for quality. So they should test and these kind of things. So, which is okay if the developers are doing the testing, at least to extend how they can do it. I think that's great to have tools such as Maestro, for example, because it's easy to set up. It fits perfect into the development tool chain. And this is the same for XUI, there's XC test Espresso, because like these are tools developed for developers, basically. Yeah, so it's easy for them to use because I think it's important to lower the burden and to lower this perception of testing is boring. I don't like testing. Testing is something that everybody can do. It's easy, which is not, and that's important. So tools have to be easy to use, and also this goes then to the direction of this low code, no code approach and recording aspect, which is okay. For an app that has a really simple UI and really simple interface and is maybe not maybe connected to the operating system or is not connecting to other third-party devices like IoT devices or smartwatches, this might be the challenge for them. So the tools need to be easy to use. And that's why that's the direction that the low-code, no-code tools are going, because I think that also, like, for example, product people or designers then can use the product. So they can already, when they think about requirements, they can already start outlining testing scenarios or even record them already on a prototype and then later on replay them in the tool. So this is something that can happen. But for companies that have like a bigger product that is running for years or is here to stay for years, I usually recommend to invest time in the tool selection to make up their mind, like what is the tech stack at this time, in a point in time, what are the tools that we would like to use. And I think there's no single tool for mobile that you should use and rely on. It's always a mixture of tools. Yeah. So you have this, as you just mentioned, you have Espresso, XC, XUI test, and other unit testing frameworks that are out there for mobile. Then you should combine those tools, yeah, to have like a set of tools that gives you the best possible solution. And there is no single bullet for it. Yeah. So there's no that's the tool chain, that's the tool stack that you should use. It depends again on the app and what is also the purpose. I mean, I've also seen apps that have been developed for like a couple of months, or vanilla apps that have only a purpose for maybe, let's say, an event, for example, or like for some marketing commercial wise. I mean, there you don't need to ramp up the complete test suite, and establish like long running test suites. Maybe it's fine to do only manual testing here. Yeah. And then good to go. Yeah. So this is really depends.
Yeah. I think your point about there's no one solution that's going to solve everyone's mobile QA problems. No. I think that really resonates with me because that's totally what we've seen as well. We work with a number of customers at Mobot where they do use detox tests. They have a bunch of Appium tests that have been written out. Those are the tests that are running on every single commit. They're running on every pull request. But that's not a replacement for manual testing. You still have to get in the car and drive, with the actual Android Auto, activated, for example. But there is, a chance to kind of also have automation for, the deep links, the camera stuff, the push notification stuff. That's the, Mobot's bread and butter. And so the right portfolio is kind of like you were saying, a number of different tools. And it really does depend on kind of the way that application needs to be used. And so that's why there's exactly like you were saying, no one size fits all.
Yeah, exactly. And just what you mentioned is this, the operating system integration, this becomes even more important to cover because I think that users are getting lazy in using apps. I mean, I could just look at myself. I mean, I have a ton of apps installed, but I merely use maybe like 10, 15 apps on a daily basis. And usually I use them when I have, for example, a push notification or I have something to react on. And this is something that it's a really hard challenge to tackle in automation. Because most of the tools, they are connected to or like tied or like focused on their sandbox, or they're plugged within their sandbox, which is the app. So they cannot leave app context, which is really like difficult to do. But this is a really important thing to keep in mind. And that push notification is a huge traffic generator, right? I mean, on Android, it's the best thing to get attention on the app. Yeah. I mean, iOS as well, but Android is a bit better because I think the notifications in Android is more powerful in terms of the feature set. So this is really something whenever you have an app out there that is using push notifications or can integrate to third-party native apps, for example, the calendar or I don't know what, you have to use some sort of solutions to get out of the app context and do automation as well. And I know that mobile is exactly doing this kind of stuff with real robots, real interaction. That's just great. I mean, that's something that it's hard to do with. I mean, I don't know any tool actually at the moment.
Yeah, that was exactly kind of what I struggled with as a product manager and why I ultimately started the company. So it's really validating to hear you say that.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you, which is, given how complicated the world of mobile is becoming, there's experts like you. I think you have a lot of intimate knowledge about what makes mobile different than your web app testing, your desktop app testing, RPA tools. There's a lot of other stuff in our industry that doesn't actually apply to mobile. What are ways that you think professionals like you and me can help advocate and sort of articulate and communicate the differences between mobile and other tech stacks, so that people start to realize, like, actually mobile is really complicated. There's all these real world things. Like, what could we be doing better as an industry or as professionals to start communicating that to our peers or other engineering teams that don't work on the mobile product or other product managers? Because that's something that I'm always working through, is trying to spread awareness about how different mobile is from other tech stacks.
Yeah, I mean, the example that I bring is like, what are the jobs or the jobs to be done that you are doing on your mobile device, and what kind of apps are you using, and what are the things you do? I mean, looking at my own habits, I mean, I use my mobile phone for everything: banking, travel booking, gaming, meeting friends, like chatting and these kind of stuff. And it's all happening here on this little tiny device. And it's our personal go. It's basically, it's our extended brain. Yeah. And the software that is running on that system has to work out. Yeah, it has to work because it's handling all of our sensitive data, and this is something that people should be aware of. And it's also something that you can see if you go to App Store ratings. Yeah, I mean, mobile users have a really high expectation when it comes to mobile apps. Yeah? So they spend a couple of €100. Now it's almost 1,000 of euros or dollars to get the latest gadgets out there. And they expect high quality from a hardware perspective. And this is the same thing that they expect from the software running on it. Yeah, they don't want to have a crappy app out there that is doing their job halfway. And also it's easy for mobile users to just with a single tap or just a few taps to go to the competitor and get another app that is working much, much better than yours. So that's the thing. I mean, mobile device, I mean, you just have to go outside, go to a train or to a park. Everyone is looking into their devices, which is sad on the one side, good on the other side for us as mobile people to work out towards those technologies. But that's the thing. So the mobile users are expecting a high quality, and that's why it's important to focus lots on mobile. And the funny thing is, or no, it's not funny, but it's surprising that still a lot of companies still don't invest enough time and money on their mobile apps. It's sometimes they start with their web application. Of course, that's the first point. Then they have maybe a responsive application, and they said, yeah, that's good enough, but it's not what users expect. Yeah, so this is something that you have to tell them. I mean, look at yourself. Like, how are you using your product? How are you using mobile? And is this the right way to use it? And then try to convince them with a personal story.
Yeah, I think in 2023, the expectations from the consumers are higher than ever before. And we've moved past this world of like, oh, a mobile app is just reading something else. You know, you're just reading the content off the screen. It's text. It's more than that. Yeah. You're using it on the go. You are using it for a very distinct purpose in a particular time and place and circumstance. And so absolutely, definitely see how excited to have another conversation again, maybe in a few months, and see how our industry continues to evolve.
Definitely, it's still interesting where it heads to. I mean, now with all the like electronic cars, like it's getting the key of your car, right? It's the mobile app, it's your device. The whole home automation is something that is still, it's already there. It's a big thing already, but it's only like looking at my like peers, my friends, my network, is that it's only used by techies, yeah, like you and me. We maybe do some home automation with apps, and we can control our lids and light bulbs and whatever. But there's like a huge potential in the market for like my mom and my dad, for example. Yeah, so they have no idea what technology is available for them to have an easier life. Yeah, so there's a huge topic. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that is coming. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us on the podcast today. I really one of the things that stood out to me about our conversation was how you've seen the evolution of mobile and this ecosystem from, over a decade ago with Windows and BlackBerry to where it is today. And it's interesting to hear that there are some differences in the tech stacks, but a lot of commonalities still in the way that we should approach testing and the balance of automated and manual. If our audience would like to read your book or check out your blog, Adventures in QA, where should they go to find all those resources?
Yeah, it's exactly adventuresinqa.com. You can find everything over there. So my book, you can get it on Leanpub. Is Amazon available as a paperback, or if you prefer ebook, you can get it as an ebook. There you find also information about my YouTube channel, the blogs post, the stuff that I'm doing, keynotes, conference talks, things that I'm going to do this year. And of course, Twitter, LinkedIn. Feel free to approach me. Happy to help out.
Yeah. Thank you for the role that you've played in just really growing this industry. And I think, I wouldn't have been able to start Mobot without the resources that you shared early on, back when you were one of very few people actually writing about mobile software testing. And I'm excited to continue to see our community grow over the next few years. But I'll always remember how you've pioneered a lot of this. And I think just everything that we talk about today came from, a lot of your early blog posts in your book, which is really cool.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words.
That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at Team Mobot. That's TEAMMOBOT. This show is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com.